Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice.
Welcome, everyone, back to the podcast. It's great to have you again join with us. It's a fun time for Rob and I to have these conversations as we've been discussing this article from Tim Keller called A Biblical Critique of Secular Justice and Critical Theory, something that we discuss in our groups really at a high level. To take some time for Rob and me to go deeper has been a great exercise for us too. And we wanted to continue to flesh out some last points from that article since we didn't get to it last time.
You ready to just dive right in?
Yeah, well, I had a couple of thoughts. One is I love the idea, so this is what we're for. And we do this for a couple of reasons. One is to have a greater perspective of what biblical justice is so that we can articulate it to others, people around us, even our friends, our family. We just feel like we have the language, we have the understanding that gives us a foundation to have solid conversations with people that are wrestling with these issues. And again, doing that in a winsome way, we hope that is not combative, it's not, being defensive, it's not because we're trying to win an argument, but because we're just trying to help people understand a deeper the breadth of the way God has designed justice. And then the second, and I would say the most important reason for us to have this conversation is because we all, and I'm thinking primarily of myself, need to be rewired around these ideas so that they become second nature. They become part of who I am. We talk about this a good bit in our groups, how justice is not what we do, it's who we are. It becomes a part of our DNA. And I'm just realizing more and more, even though I think about these things a lot, I've got a long way to go in understanding how these principles can become part of who I am and how I operate, and a little bit more second nature. And this takes time, it takes discussion, it takes understanding, takes this kind of conversation. So this is why we wanted to wrap this part up by going through these four principles.
Yeah, I love that. So where we left off was talking about the limitations of critical theory. And I think it's worth revisiting just that where we landed the plane. That last point was talking about how much it can be really highly performative around an identity, like it can be very self-righteous. It also is prone to domination. I mentioned that because that's the exact counter of what biblical justice does. And we're going to revisit that here in a second. But there's basically four main points that the article talks about when it comes to comparing, again, the most prominent secular theory, which is postmodern, which is all about power, comparing that to what biblical justice is. But it also, he makes the first point is basically that biblical justice addresses all the concerns of justice that's found across all of the views. Biblical justice includes all of the truth from all the human-made forms of justice and the socially constructed ones, because it's the ultimate reality, right? Like it's because God exists and God created this world. Therefore, of course, these are grounded in God and who He is, right? So
it's the Jesus answer. It's the Jesus answer.
Yeah, because Jesus, right? Because God, and that really is true in this.
But it's deep, it's full, it's comprehensive. And that's, you make an interesting point that there's still some truths in the secular theories, but they're not completely true. They don't hold all of these things together. So as we're engaging with folks, there is some way, there's some natural ways in which we can have common agreement around some of these ideas.
Yes.
So we don't completely dismiss them. So if somebody feels that justice is about fairness, or justice is centered around power, or justice is centered around equity, there is some truth in each of those ideas. And so we don't have to be so combative, but we have the opportunity to help people and ourselves see a broader picture of what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's really good because it's hard to talk about our cultural today, right? It's just really tough. It feels like you're navigating landmines and having these conversations, which leads to a lot of fear and hesitation of even touching this. Let's just leave this alone. Let's just leave it alone. So first point is, hey, it's got all of them. All the truth from all the theories are wrapped up in biblical justice. It's the most complete. And then the second point is this idea of being holistic. So that I'll go ahead and, show you in typical Keller fashion that the last 3 points are, it's going to be focused on being holistic, how it safeguards against domination, and then how it really subverts in a radical way our understanding of power. So if you're paying attention, the buzzwords are going to be holistic, domination, and power. And those are the ones we're going to spend our time. And I'd love to hear you kind of expand more about your experience and your perspective on these, David. But so this first one, holistic. Keller talks about this idea that biblical justice is significantly more well-grounded because it's based on God's character, which is a moral absolute. So these other theories are all man-made, which means they change with the winds of human culture. Mm-hmm. And so this one is rooted in a God that never changes, which means It transcends time, which is so cool.
No, and we cover this central to why justice is so important, that it's part of who God is, that he says, I am the God of justice. Mm-hmm. That's pretty clear. And it's what he loves. He says, I love justice in Isaiah 61. So rooted in God's character provides just a solid grounding for the way we think about what biblical justice is.
Yeah. And this idea of holistic is all the other theories you're talking about, they're narrow. They make you pick one passion, right? Whether that's I'm about individual rights or the individual, right? I'm about society. I'm about the environment. I'm about people's spiritual condition. All of that is under the umbrella of biblical justice. It doesn't make you choose one of those.
Right.
They all matter to God because he created all of it. He created the world. Creation matters to him. People's souls matter to him. Social structures matter to him. All of it. And so that's so cool that you don't have to pick one and ignore the other, which is what when a man-made theories are always forcing you to do, is choose one and turn the volume down on the other, which is kind of what I felt all the time. I don't know about you, David, like navigating the nonprofit sector, you kind of feel like, yeah, people are all about one of those things, but like, I don't know. Let's talk about, bringing and changing structures, but you're not really allowed to show up with your faith and how like God is center to your driving force of your wanting to care for the poor. That was a great example for me. It felt incomplete. Yeah, right. A lot of times in my work, I couldn't feel like I could be my whole self, or really the whole picture of this was wanted in a lot of conversations. But it's sad because you feel like, man, we're missing the boat on the full picture of the beauty here.
Again, it comes back to the both and idea, and all those things matter. I think, going back to my experience leading Jobs for Life, we were about poverty, we're about joblessness, we're about unemployment, underemployment. So it's also good to be really focused too on an issue of injustice, because we couldn't do it all.
It's not bad to champion a specific cause with specific strengths, right?
For sure. But we knew that we were just a part of a piece, It was just we were a cog in the wheel in the overall, movement toward making things as they were supposed to be, more just. And where we struggled, honestly, is when we were part of a broader system that wasn't doing that, that didn't see that moving other pieces that affect the way someone goes to work was also necessary. So at Jobs for Life, for example, we're doing more now than we used to at the beginning, where we're really helping employers understand how they need to create places of work that are more just and are places where people really thrive when they go to work, and understand the barriers that people, particularly from low-income backgrounds, face in order for them to be great employees. If we only just train people to work, but we didn't help them go to a place where they could thrive, then we may not have solved the problem. But how much can you do of that? You're limited in what you're able to do. You have to trust other people are pursuing their causes in a manner that's pursuing biblical justice. But as we know, we don't live in a world that's guided by these principles, so it becomes very, very challenging. But the concept, the idea still remains. It's all God's. He wants it all for His glory and His purpose, and to be how He's intended. And He gives us foretastes of that as we pursue it, even though ultimately we operate within a broken world, right?
So that's number one. There's a lot to it, kind of this holistic nature of biblical justice. The second point he makes is that biblical justice has built-in safeguards against domination. So kind of this whole idea of heaven in the forefront of like, this is the goal we're working towards, because this idea that if you don't believe that eventually God is going to undo and make all the sad things come untrue, right? And make all the wrong things right one day, then you're just gonna grab for whatever you can if this earth is all that there is. But we as Christians, we can resist this urge to kind of dominate and fix everything, because honestly, Christianity doesn't claim that if we follow its playbook, all of our problems are going to be fixed. It never says that. We know eventually He's going to right every wrong, but not on this side of heaven are we promised that. So we're not actually working on the goal to fully fix the world. We actually don't believe it's going to happen, which is kind of can be seen as a downer a little bit. Like we're going to fail at this goal.
No, wait a second, Rob. We're not here to fix things.
I think we're here to show people what God's kingdom is and usher in the kingdom in a way that does advance towards flourishing without fully realizing the goal. That's how I would word it.
Well, I mean, I interject because we need to not just pass over this idea.
It's kind of big.
Flippantly.
Yeah.
And, as I think about this for myself, this is one of those where it's easy for me not to see the motivations that I have, where I even derive my value, because I believe that, my job is to fix leaders. It's to come alongside leaders and help them grow and become better leaders. And of course, that's a noble thing. Of course, I need to pursue that. But I do that with the mindset that I'm sort of I can think of myself almost like a savior.
Yeah.
Like I'm here to have impact, and my life is valuable if I have that impact. My life is valuable if I'm successful. My life is valuable if I fix this. And even with my good intentions, where I show up to do the things that I do, I don't realize how self-focused I am. And so that's where this plays out for me, that if I don't have this right perspective, that God is going to make all things new, that we do live in a broken world, that we are to create those foretastes of God's kingdom, that yes, we pursue justice, yes, we pursue things to be fixed in that they're meant to be as they're intended to be. But we do so with the mentality that we know that not everything is going to be fixed. We know too that it's not all about me. It's all about God, and that ultimately He's going to make all things new. Then it completely changes my sense of value on who I am and what I do, and how I even approach what it means to be just.
And that's why I think Christianity, when you compare it to every other justice theory that is made by humans, it says we can fit, we're the answer. This theory, this idea of justice, if we only focus on this, power, fairness, equity, this will fix the world, which is like so much hubris, right? because you're the ones that came up with the idea, and you're saying, yeah, my idea is the right one. And if this theory is everybody's theory, then the whole world's going to be this utopian place, right? It elevates man, and God is nowhere to be found, right? Because it's their idea. Christianity comes in and it's the exact opposite. We're not the center of the story. We see God as a huge God that actually is one day going to create this beautiful utopia of heaven, right? And the kingdom one day. And he's inviting us to be a part of that. But when you come into a mentality, the reason the other theories are prone to domination is there's this weight of, we got to fix this. And we got to get this out there. And we got to get all these other people are the problem. And they kind of just need to get on our bandwagon, or you're for us or you're against us. Christianity does not allow you the luxury of picking up that worldview where you're just like, yeah, we're the right ones and everyone else is an enemy. It's like, no, we're all the enemy against God. But because God reacted to us in grace, we are invited in to react and treat others with grace, right? And humility. And say, we're all the problem, right? It's not you're the problem. It's I'm starting with I'm the problem, and you also are the problem, but I'm not leading with that, right? I'm starting with the posture, I'm the messed up one. I'm going to come to you in humility, and I'm also going to it's almost like more relaxed in a way, not in the like a laissez-faire, we don't care what happens to the world because we're all going to get to heaven one day, but like we can chill a little bit knowing that God's going to ultimately right it all in the end. It's almost like we're free, not relaxed. I'd say we're freed up to love people better than I think all other theories do. And I think history, look all throughout history as like anyone that doesn't base it on God doesn't love neighbor well, because they end up pressing and dominating people who are against them. And Christianity does the exact opposite of that, which is so beautiful in how rare it is, right?
For sure. That freedom doesn't lead to resignation. Like things are broken, so there's nothing we can do. We're just going to live our lives and not worry about the outcome because the outcome has already been won. It also doesn't lead to frenetic, like stressed out, anxious living to try to fix things that we can't fix.
Which is a callback to episode 1. It actually makes rest possible.
Absolutely.
You have to have that in mind of like, who ultimately is going to fix this in the end? Is it me or is it God? Because if it's me, I can never rest.
And in that freedom, therefore, you can fully lament. You can cry out to God for the brokenness that we see and experience. We can ask him to change things because it's all about him. And we can do that with trust, knowing that he has the power and the ability to make things right, knowing that he will make things right. So it's this freedom that gives us, a proper sense of urgency that is mixed in with this idea that the victory has been won, and should allow us then to, again, have a spirit of joy and peace and presence and patience that allows us to navigate these messy waters without getting so undone by them or frustrated by them, or get to the point where we're said, forget it, I'm done.
Yeah. And I think lastly on this point, before we move to the final one, is this pressure that maybe we can feel as believers of like, hey, we got to get our worldview and like it needs to become dominant, and we're going to change the world through becoming more powerful. That actually is not what Jesus did. Look at Philippians 2 as a great example verse of there, right? And all throughout Scripture, almost every example, the whole storyline, the way that Keller puts in the article, the whole storyline of the Bible is God's repeated identification with the powerless and the marginalized. Over and over again, God's deliverers are usually racial and social outsiders, people who are seen to be weak and rejected in the eyes of the powerful elites of the world. So that fundamentally means that we need to take the pressure off ourselves. The answer is not more power. Actually, the answer is the opposite. I think God prefers to use people who actually are powerless, because that's where he gets the glory. So he doesn't need powerful people at all. He can use them and is inviting them too. I mean, clearly there's so many invitations, Jesus interacting with powerful people. The invitation was on the table, right? The rich young ruler, Nicodemus, like these are folks who had money, had power, had influence. They're invited, but those folks don't need to put the pressure on themselves. It's like, oh yeah, it's actually, I'm God's plan A because I got those things. I don't think that's actually true. I don't think Scripture validates that, right? Which is humbling.
Yeah. Again, we need to sit in that. I think even about, who I pursue in relationship, because so much of us think that, we need to be around and with people of power, people of influence, and who ultimately has power that we might overlook.
Yeah. Who is God using? Because that's who he's always used through the course of history, that is not in my social circle, that I'm missing out on seeing all of who God is and joining him in what he's doing in the world, because I actually only know other powerful people.
Right.
We need to sit with that. And if you're listening to this, what questions does that bring up, or what hesitations? And wrestle with those. Wrestle those with the Lord. Wrestle those, in your next Just leadership cohort. Bring it up. Talk about it. Pray about it. See what God might be doing in your heart. So, all right, landing the plane here. Last point he talks about when it comes to why biblical justice is better as it compares to kind of secular theories is that only biblical justice offers a radically subversive understanding of power. So Keller says, because it is rooted in the death and resurrection of Jesus, Christianity neither eliminates nor merely reverses the ruler/ruled binary. Rather, it subverts it. So it doesn't just throw it away, it subverts it. When Jesus saved us through his use of power only for service, he changes our attitude towards and our use of power. All right, David, unpack that for us.
Well, Jesus' power was a power that was reflected in his death, right? So the power he calls us to is a power that dies. Dies to ourself. So, we've talked about this in our groups, and we mentioned this before, I think in the last episode, with looking at the postmodern theory of secular theory of justice that's so focused on power, and that the idea of being just is just move power from one group to another. Basically, if you have power, you're not just. If you don't have power, you've been the oppressed, and so we just need to redistribute power. But if that power is a dominating power, one that subverts others, then you haven't changed anything. You just repositioned where people are being oppressed, where they're being dominated, and we haven't fixed anything. So we have to then understand a whole different idea of what power is in order to understand what biblical justice is. And so this is a whole section that we talk about when we talk about giving away power, that the idea of, which is so relevant in our society, you hear this all the time, leaders need to give away power. But if we don't define what that power is, and that it's a power to die power, a power that decreases so that others increase, one that allows for people to flourish and is completely others-centered, then we will experience what God intends through biblical justice. What's interesting is, as we talk about this idea, I quickly looked up the idea, just Googled giving away power, and immediately what pops up are statements like, don't ever give away your power. The last thing you want to do is give away your power. There are all these graphics that talk about how, if you give up your power, you're giving up yourself, and you don't need to have people have that kind of power over you. And what you see in those statements is this idea that power in our culture is so tied to identity. and that people find their identity in the way that or their value and the way they think about their power. For believers, we know that our identity doesn't come from the power that we have. It comes from just what Jesus has done for us, that our identity is in him, that we're image bearers of God, and that we understand that our value is secure. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we accomplish, because of the forgiveness that Jesus has provided for us. He even makes us be seen as holy and righteous, even though we're deeply sinful and turn our backs on him every day. And so we're considered precious, valuable men and women who are the apple of his eye. And we don't need, therefore, to have power be the thing that defines us. And yet that's the way in our society people are defined. So everyone would say, you're right. Don't give away your value. Of course, don't. You're precious, you're valuable, but it's not power that's at issue there. So we need to understand those differences so that we then can embrace this whole idea of power being something that is elevating of others, that is decreasing, that is disarming instead of dominating and manipulating and trying to get our way all the time because we're due. Things like that. And again, I'll say one last thing. As white men, we don't even know the power that we have because it's normal.
Sure.
And I don't know the power of just being who I am in my society as it relates to race and culture that I even have that influences the way people respond to me, view me, or the ways that I can do things and not do things. And so we have to be in touch with that so that then we know how to steward it in a way that allows us to elevate those around us.
That was the question I wrote down as you were talking, is who am I serving with the power that I have?
Yeah.
Which implies I got to get to know the power that I have. But then once you're familiar with what power, you named it, who am I serving with the power that I have? I think that's a really good self-reflection question that maybe we could leave as we wrap up our time. Any final thoughts, David, as we land the plane on this article?
No, I just, I had a question from a really close friend of mine who was struggling with some of these issues and asked me the question, when did you get to the point where you found yourself that you weren't saying the wrong thing in certain situations because you'd wrestle with these issues of justice? And I said, I haven't. I haven't gotten to that point. And, we talk about this being a journey of what it means to become a just leader, that it's not a destination. You're not unjust one day and all of a sudden you're just. It's a journey and there's an ebb and flow. And I would just say that as we talk through all this, that we give ourselves the ability to understand that this takes time to really figure this out in our own context and let these ideas sink in, because we're just prone to be self-focused. We're prone to want power. We want, the things that give us power, like more money and things that we think are going to satisfy us. We're, we don't even see the things that we can't see. And, it takes a lot to unpack this for ourselves. So we need to be okay with that, not be discouraged by it, but understand it's a journey.
Yeah. And I think as my encouragement and final takeaway would be, Keller talks about in other places how, the gospel, when it really captivates our hearts, it actually ushers into our lives a path of downward mobility, which is crazy countercultural, right? And that's that. I feel like everybody, you even hear that word, you're like, what? Like, no, like,
nobody's going to listen.
Nobody's
going to listen anymore, Rob, to our next episodes if we're.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, maybe we're gonna experience some of our own downward mobility.
So
Show's canceled.
come
Show's
listen to
canceled after
this.
this one.
Come listen to this, and then you will be a part of Downward Mobility.
It's not a great pitch for corporate sponsors, that's for sure.
No.
But that is the way of the cross, right? That is the
Yep.
Savior that we claim. That was what he did, and he came and said, "Follow me, do likewise." And so, the question is, where am I experiencing downward mobility?
And I would go back to your word and experience the freedom that comes with that. The things that we long for found downward mobility.
Yeah.
That's convicting for me.
Well, thus concludes part 2. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation. We're not done. A lot more justice conversations to be had, but I think we built a really solid foundation. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, David. Till next time. To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.